I'm a venture partner with Nauta Capital. We are a B2B software investment firm, primarily based in London, in Barcelona, and in Berlin. Early stage investors investing at seed and Series A. Delighted to be here. So I'll hand over to David here, who's the CEO of SenseOn. They're building a security architecture for the future for the entire organization. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, David, and about SenseOn.
Oh, thanks a lot, and it's a pleasure to speak to you, come here and speak today. I don't mind admitting a bit of a weirdo, actually. My background comes from the Royal Marines. I joined the Marines when I was 18, mainly because my mum wouldn't sign the papers when I was 16 and let me go any earlier than that. And then I went into specialist military units, so I spent a long time doing special operations around the globe. And during that time, I began to solve some of our most difficult problems with technology, so I developed a lot of hacking techniques. All of a sudden, the UK community had a geek that didn't mind to be shot at, so I was then sent across and I worked across the intelligence community for 15 years. I left in 2015 and I began teaching cyber operations to law enforcement and government, as well as doing incident response. So when a company gets hacked, I would go in and I would help them recover from the hack as quickly as possible. I joined another UK startup mainly because my mate said, Dave, you do not have a clue about the commercial world, come and join me. And so I joined a company called Darktrace. I was number 3 in the sales team there, which was awkward as a geek, I'll admit now. And then I founded SenseOn in 2017. I really funded it with the mission to really hyper automate the investigative process in an obvious, transparent and trustworthy way. And I really believe that, given all of the strategic trends that are happening in the industry at the minute and in society as a whole, the advancement of the threat, the headlines that you read on an all too frequent basis, loads of data, loads of complexity in the enterprise environment for CISOs to decide what to do with, and then also a paucity of skill shortage. We believe being able to automate as much as possible is going to be critical to the future. So that's us.
Great. So Graeme Hickey, he's a senior director, hardware engineering at PQShield. The company is just spun out of Oxford and raised 20 million Series A. So please tell us a little bit more about future-proofing the cryptographic products and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my background is in semiconductors. I've worked in secure product development and cryptography for a long time. Let's not get into how long. But I've got a good background in engineering and leadership throughout many different big SOC providers in that space. Providing applications for banking and secure communications, these type of things. So that brought me to PQShield, who are a startup developing cryptography technology for basically the next generation of crypto, which will be used on the internet, but through all infrastructure, all IoT devices, everything. So there's a major threat looming there that's related to quantum technology, and we are kind of positioning ourselves to address that. And I think that's a huge thing for the industry. It takes a long time for cryptography and security to transition in this type of industry. So we are trying to raise the awareness of this potential threat to the existing technology and encourage people to really look at how they should start transitioning their implementations to something that's more quantum secure.
Great. So we're going to talk about some of the future-proofing techniques and what does it really mean in this post-quantum world, and how do we keep our data and products safe? So the final panelist we have is Sandrine, CEO and co-founder of Cosmian, a data security and confidential computing startup based in Paris, who've also raised capital recently. So tell us a little bit more about Cosmian and about yourself.
Okay, so hi everyone, bonjour. My background is in tech for like 15 years. I work for companies like Microsoft and Google, and I always wanted to start my own business, something in B2B, something in tech, and here I am in cybersecurity and cryptography, so far so good. So I started a company 4 years ago, and what we do at Cosmian, we are a leading platform with cybersecurity solutions, leveraging advanced and modern cryptographic techniques. Those techniques now allow for keeping data encrypted all the time. whether it's at rest or it's in use, which is very new. So what we say to our customers, cybersecurity people, CTO, we said now, you can keep data encrypted all the time. So if you don't do it, and if you leave your data in ciphertext, in clear text, it really means that you really want to be blackmailed by ransomware. So maybe you're masochistic, but anyway. So now people have to understand that it's not something that is going to happen in 2 years or even 6 months. This is possible now. You can actually encrypt everything. This is what we call ubiquitous encryption. You can keep your data encrypted all the time, everywhere, whether it's at rest or in use. And I will stop here for the moment.
Great. Great. So that set the stage well for talking about, so we know what products you're developing today. What is the future of cybersecurity hold? What are the unsolved problems that, in your opinion, are still something that people are grappling with? And what is the next generation of cybersecurity products, in your view, look like? So maybe start with you, David.
Yeah, no worries. So when I think about this question, I really like to consider the strategic trends that are either going to create new problems or compound the problems that we've already got. And I've touched on them already, but worth like double clicking, I think, So the first one that we've seen, so there was a great sort of saying after Edward Snowden released all the documents from the NSA, and someone said, hey, there's no monopoly on information anymore, even like top secret information, And the reason why I mention that is in relation to the first strategic trend that I think is important, which is the advancement of the threat. Well, the pace by which, the information and capability that has taken billions of dollars to invest in, and how that trickles down into traditionally less capable threat actors, such as like cyber criminals, which would be the next tier, and then your sort of hacktivists, script kiddies would be the next lower tier down. And so in terms of knowledge, skills, tooling, and in sort of business model, for want of a better word, like in the last 10 years, like the threat has come on significantly. That's not going to change, I don't think, So that is a key challenge for the future, The next challenge I would say that needs to be addressed is the complexity of the environment. So you can almost trace it back to the mid-2000s with the advent of cloud computing and infrastructure as a service, software as a service. That's obviously great things that we all exploit as founders, but it makes these enterprise environments far more complex. And so for this chief information security officer to get their arms around that is difficult, because no longer do you control the devices that you want to monitor and give data on. The third trend is the sheer volume of data being produced. So 71 zettabytes of data produced, adopted, and consumed in the world in 2021. To set that into context, if 1 byte was 1 grain of rice, 1 zettabyte would fill the Pacific Ocean with rice, So if I'm a hacker and I'm after data, there's just more of it around for me to grab. If I'm after specific data, there's more noise for me to hide in to exfiltrate that successfully, And then finally, the paucity of talent, so 3 to 4 empty cybersecurity roles in the industry that are unfilled, depending on what things that you reach out. So a long way around saying, advancement of the threat complexity, sheer amount of data, and the paucity of talent means that we have to automate, as in we have to think of innovative ways to solve these complex challenges, and I think certainly with what the team have got up here with regards to encryption, automation, I think are 2 key trends that we're going to have to address in the future.
Great. Anything else, Graeme, from your perspective to add about what next generation cyber will look like, or what are the bigger challenges that are yet to be solved?
Absolutely. I think in the near term, maybe something to add on to that is just, the rise of the connectivity of everything on the internet is brought, much bigger threats than existed before. My background has been in secure products when we used to have really secure ICs for payment or for banking, these type of things. But that now, when we have things like the Internet of Things, it has brought connected devices, automotives now connected to the internet as well, right? Brings new threats to platforms that are not traditionally very secure. And I think that's bringing these type of applications and platforms up to the highest level of security is something that's really important. It's ongoing at the moment. But the education has to continue and make sure these integrators are aware of the threats and adopt the standards that probably have been in existence in secure products for a number of years, but really start to adopt that. And part of that is evaluation and certification. The standards exist, but they produce quite a high barrier to entry in certain markets, banking markets, for example. But the approaches are very relevant, to IoT, to automotive, to start looking at how the intrusion detection, simple things like you mentioned, kind of low-level hacktivists. But as we start to move forward, the type of attacks that would be more prevalent on, really secure devices like side channel attacks, these type of things become very much more relevant to IoT and infrastructure and automotive. So I think that's important in the kind of probably reasonable, short term, next 5 years. And then the area where I'm working, which is post-quantum, is really looking at the effect quantum computers would have on the existing infrastructure or cryptography. So I guess a lot of people here are looking at quantum computing from what can be achieved from a positive perspective. But like any computing platform, a computer can be used for negatives, right? And a quantum computer, if it was powerful enough, it has been shown it would break the existing public key technology that we have. So when that happens, the reality of when that could come into existence, be it in 10 years, is to an extent irrelevant to that. Cryptography is shown to be traditionally take a long time to transition to new standards. The move from DES to AES, for example, in banking, it took decades. So if we look at that decade timeline, the possibility of a quantum computer that could break public key encryption in 10 years, is that possible? I'm probably not the right person to answer that, but if we haven't addressed that by that point, we are in a real bad place. So where we're working, and this is standardization, NIST have a competition that are looking at the next generation post-quantum cryptography. And that's where we fit in, is we're looking at how that can be rolled out, the effect on the existing infrastructure, can it be replaced, trying to educate markets as to the difference between existing public key infrastructure and post-quantum infrastructure, and helping people transition to that kind of world, which sounds a long time in the future, but tech moves fast, right? So that's probably one of the major threats.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the time horizon in front of us is not just 10 years, but 20, 50 years. And as we've moved from the on-prem environment to the cloud, we've seen new scenarios arise. We've seen the threat surface expand considerably. And with IoT becoming more mainstream, automotive, etc., there are new assets that we need to think about and how to keep them safe and secure. And obviously, I think with AI comes the additional challenges of thinking about how this AI can now be trained, perhaps to do things it was not meant to do if hackers get into our systems, and new ways in which we can now start to protect our systems which have AI at the back of it. And as Sandrine, maybe from a data and use perspective.
So actually, to come back to your question on challenges in the field of deep tech and cybersecurity, I mean, I don't mean to be provocative, but there is no challenges in the technical side, because this is deep tech, and this is why we are here for. This is to solve big, hairy, difficult problems. That's what's the fun. So if you don't like to do that, you go to a different area of work. So we will actually overcome any difficulties, whether it's now or in 6 months or 10 years. And in cryptography is actually a field where it's what our clients want in cybersecurity using cryptography is more security, more speed, more performance. And now things are improving almost like every quarter. So we can do stuff now that we couldn't do a year ago. So it's fantastic because it's, we can really push the limits. So the technical challenge, that's not the issue. The thing that you actually pointed is more the business challenge and the adoption challenge. Because as you say, our clients, they are using cybersecurity solutions that were designed 15 years ago, and they were made actually for on-premises infrastructure. They were system-level encryption, where you were, entering a system, getting your data, and going back, and that's it. There was no collaboration, no intersection. Now, actually, the move to cloud, and it's even more than a move, everything is in the cloud now, so it's not more on premises. You have applications, real-time application, connecting to big data repository in the cloud with a financial transaction, medical data. It's really non-stop. And for this type of environment, this is why you need actually new cryptography. So the gap for me is rather, to actually be around that massive upgrade in terms of infrastructures, because we also do post-quantum resistance cryptography, but actually our clients, even in big banks, they can't support that. They don't have the infrastructure to do so. So that's really a problem. So we can crack the problem, but actually the implementation is still very complicated. So I think that in deep tech, it's not even in 5 years or 10 years. Right now, there are great stuff that company can use, but they mostly have a legacy actually with old systems. And this is for, I would say, big customers. Actually, we see a lot of possibility in the digital field, in the sense, think about all the unicorns, think about the big scale-up in fintech, in health tech, in biotech, in medtech. Those companies, they are not moving to the cloud. They were born in the cloud anyway, and they are facing the same issue. They move everything, they have everything in the cloud, and they don't want the cloud to learn anything from the data or what they do with the data. So this is where the big business is. So this is very exciting because, yes, you have some difficulties, the adoption system, but if you look at different types of customers and environments, they have different considerations and different needs.
Okay. Makes sense. So let's maybe switch gears a little bit and talk about what's happening within the public sector domain, right? So cybersecurity has been a hot topic around national security. A number of companies like yourselves have been exploring both selling to the public sector as well as private enterprises. How do we think the future of sort of sharing some of this knowledge with other nation states, discussing what the top priorities are, and do you guys yourselves within your startups think about the public sector as a large organization or a large buying center?
Yes, definitely. The challenge for the public sector, and not only nationwide, but at the level of different actually nations. For me, the gap is that hackers get more and more sophisticated. They try stuff, and they try stuff very difficult and very sophisticated. And on the other side, when you try to be on top and actually to catch up and also to propose sophisticated stuff, you have an issue with labelization, certification, everything. So I think that more than collaborating, across states in terms of coordinating cybersecurity or stuff like that, it's really to find a way to be more ahead. And find a way to test and learn a lot more about all the potential of deep tech can bring actually to cybersecurity and across the board. Because things that we do now, so we have some clients, they are early adopters, and including the public sector, and they say, okay, we understand cryptography, we talk to you, we have some recommendation, that's fine, at the higher level, cybersecurity agency, and so on and so forth. But the rest actually of the companies, they say, we want certification, standardization, stuff like that. Sure. This will take minimum 3 years. So in 3 years, even if you have certification, the sophistication of hackers will be 10 times that. So there's really something at that level in terms of, I would say, coordination, much more than sharing best practice, but really to organize ourselves, to be more innovative, to be more upfront and more sophisticated about those threats by testing and learning a lot more about what deep tech can bring actually to the sector.
So David or Graeme, thinking about sort of, what are the checks and balances that are required here, right? So when you're selling to a public sector, a lot more scrutiny, the sales cycles are considerably longer. They have also started sort of engaging with the startup ecosystem because we see a lot of innovation coming from here. We're, building technologies that are going to future-proof our products. What, in your mind, is the right model in which they can engage with us in the early stage? And obviously, we've seen things like the NCSC Accelerator, which I think has been a step in the right direction, and this is something that's based here, obviously. So any thoughts around what the right model is for us to be able to engage with these organizations and really build these dual-use technologies?
Well, I don't mind taking a stab at this one initially, only because I guess we probably do speak from a vantage point, because we're actually a national security strategic investment fund portfolio. So NSIF basically funded through the British Business Bank, to invest in technologies that are regarded to be of strategic importance to the government, largely comparable to Incotel in the US, and despite being a skeptic, having been in government myself, I've actually been pretty impressed. Like the organization and the ability to connect government, because fundamentally the challenges that we see in government are maybe even amplified to what we see in the private sector, because they can't pay the salaries that they need to get access to the talent, to like people go into government and the public sector for different reasons, but therefore it's very difficult when people are flashing large salaries at you in the private sector to retain that talent for a long period of time. And so there is a really good business case to make sure that we are connecting governments in with like the most innovative technologies to mitigate against these things. And so just from our perspective in particular, it's been really, really useful. It's opened up lots of doors, lots of conversations and potential customers to be able to like collaborate with, as you say, which is essentially a very, very large market,
Maybe if I could just touch on something you mentioned about the sharing of information between nation states and things. I think that's a really important thing. In the current climate, there's a danger of fragmentation and different nations adopting different standards. And in the cryptography area, which I work in our company, is standardization and using the same crypto technology across the board is a really important thing. The crypto community is responsible for analysing what goes out there, making sure it's secure. So if that starts to fragment and we have different countries adopting different standards going forward, there's a real risk that what we're creating it could be insecure. It needs the community to focus on the right technology, the right standards going forward. And so I think that's a really important thing. The US are obviously see the post-quantum aspect as a big threat. There's been memos from the White House that anyone working with the government has to have a solution for post-quantum within I think it was 3 months of the point when they announced that. So there is a real momentum from governments and nation states. The type of threat that I'm speaking about is going to be something that would be a nation state that would implement it initially, right? But I think we know from previous that this is possible. Like nation states could be harvesting our data and looking to encrypt it later, right? So I think the more we work together and having the right standards in place going forward is only going to be better for security and everyone's security.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great. I think we only have a few minutes left in the panel, and I think it wouldn't be fair if we didn't talk about the market. It's been a few quarters now that we've been talking about a downturn. How long does it last? What does it mean for cybersecurity? The investment that's needed in this crucial area, not just from a national security perspective, but for enterprises at large, and deep tech in general as well. How do you see the funding environment over the next 18 to 24 months, specifically in cyber, changing, if you will? Would love to hear from each of you. So maybe starting with you, Sandrine.
Well, I was going to return you the question as you're an investor, so maybe you have a better insider view than the entrepreneur. So I think, yes, there's definitely a market downturn, but I don't think this is affecting cybersecurity itself. I think cybersecurity it's a hot topic. It's more than that. It's something we don't see any cut in budget from our customer side. Even furthermore, I would say they want to increase the budget and they want to be on top, to catch up on sophistication. So maybe then within cybersecurity, you have different fields with different technology, different deep tech technology, different maturity level. So maybe that for technology which are, very, very, very early stage, that might be a bit more complicated to get funded, but I'm not even sure. I think that's what needs to be shown still across the board is to show the market traction. So this, whatever you are doing, a very early stage project or something which is more commercial, market traction, showing interest of customer or post-station customers in cybersecurity. This is really a never-ending story. So even if there is a downturn, I mean, for this particular type of solution, I think that there's still a very interesting boulevard for companies.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think cybersecurity has to be one of these things that, it has to be the last thing that companies should cut, So it may be, there's obviously a softening in the kind of VC market, and it may be more difficult than we've seen for Series A to raise funds, but I think in terms of the companies that we're engaging with, are quite forward-looking. They know they have to have a strategy to address these threats, in the longer term. So to cut that is a major risk, and we don't see that at the moment. I guess there could potentially be maybe a shortening or dry up of some of the R&D projects or R&D budgets that we kind of interact with certain larger companies with. But I would certainly hope that it's be one of the last things to be kind of cut on the kind of technology budget.
Last words?
Not surprisingly, agree. Cybersecurity is pretty resilient. Broader feedback, if there's any other funders in the room from across our investor portfolios, is actually largely resilient across most sectors, apart from maybe you got to go one step higher to get the deal signed off, maybe some slight additional steps in the sales cycle. But actually, pretty much business as usual. We're not seeing that pre-COVID panic of the sky is falling down. Which brings an interesting point, about the headlines that we read every day. I had a really interesting comment from an investor just the other day where he was saying, listen, we are just getting back to 2016, 2017 valuations and levels. And this is why there's this disparity, because the founders are going, oh, but my business is fine. But why am I not getting my 10 billion valuation, a Series A? Well, it's because the Fed is taking money out of it. It's just simple buy and selling. So we just got to be prepared that those are going to just go back to normal, previous, pre-COVID sort of scenarios. And it is probably the new reality, or it's probably the reality that has come back, So, yeah.
I think it's a very good time to be an entrepreneur in cybersecurity, and I think it's going to be very competitive for VC in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you guys it's good to hear that everybody's been hearing what your advisors and investors have been telling you as well, and this is something that we've been working with our portfolio companies as well. We are back to a more realistic expectation. I think the last 18 months was probably the speed at which deals were getting done and the valuations are unrealistic to be able to be sustainable. So you go back to having and building a business which we can come to the market and show that there is a real need, somebody who's crucial, it's crucial to their job to solve this problem, and your product really solves it. At the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. Right? So I think in terms of valuations as well, where in the past it might have been reasonable for you to go and look for funding without a product, without a revenue, I would say think long and hard before starting that business. So we will stop there. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks to the audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.